Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Why You Should Play series, and in today's video we're going to be discussing on one of my favorite champions in the game, and that is Omega Sentinel. Now this girl, oh my goodness, we'll leave the words for after the explanation of the abilities, but yeah, Omega Sentinel, she was really hyped up and had a lot of high regard at the beginning when she was first released. However, after a while, she's kind of fallen down in terms of usability. Not a lot of people use her anymore. However, the purpose of this video is kind of to re-highlight her abilities, what she's capable of doing, and pretty much sell you on why you should play her. Now, like we always do with these kinds of videos, let's actually go over all of her abilities first, and then later on explain why you should play her. Omega Sentinel takes 0 damage from bleed as well as poison effects, and she also gains immunity to regen reduction from poison. And once she's inflicted with either a bleed or a poison effect, she will then gain a self-repair buff which heals 20% of missing health over 10 seconds. The ability does not stack and actually ends early if she is stunned. Moving on to her incinerates. Now the max of these that you can actually have is 20, and they deal a certain amount of energy damage over 6 seconds. They also remove perfect block chance as well as reduce block proficiency by 50%, and against mutant champions, it inflicts an identical plasma debuff instead. Now on to her pre-fight ability. She can rotate between 3 types of weapons. The first one is the nanite carapace, the second one is the electrostatic pole, and the third is the plasma wave weapon. You can actually choose which one you want to start with before the fight starts in the pre-fight selection screen, so yeah. Once you're in the fight, you can actually rotate to the next weapon by doing a heavy attack. Her second medium attack will inflict a debuff determined by her current weapon, and also if the opponent is inflicted with 3 or more of her personal non-damaging debuffs, she will then inflict an incinerate debuff instead. Now the nanite carapace inflicts a cowardice debuff which reduces special attack damage by 10% for 8 seconds, and the electrostatic pole inflicts a heal block debuff which prevents the opponent from healing for 8 seconds, and the plasma wave inflicts a tracking debuff which bypasses the effects of miss for 8 seconds, and finally finishing a combo with a light attack or landing a heavy attack will pause all her personal debuffs on the opponent for 7 seconds. Adaptive Body. Her adaptive body grants her immunity to nullify, stagger as well as fate steal effects, and against mutants, her ability accuracy cannot be modified. She gains an indefinite armor up buff whenever either champion makes contact with the same basic attack twice in a row, which increases her armor rating by a certain amount, and she gains an additional armor up buff against mutants, and the max amount of armor buffs you can have is 10. Now once she's struck while she has 10 or more armor up buffs, she will then consume all of them, purify any stun debuffs, and then gain a 100% chance to auto block for 2 seconds. This auto block also triggers the parry mastery, and if she's defending, the ability only requires 5 armor ups to activate. Once she auto blocks an opponent, she also inflicts an incinerate debuff on them, and if she's facing against a mutant, she then inflicts an identical plasma debuff instead. Now upon activation of special attacks, all of her personal debuffs will be paused for the duration of the special attack and for 2 seconds afterwards. And also upon contact of the special attacks, she consumes up to 5 armor ups, increasing the duration of all debuffs inflicted or refreshed by the special attack by 1 second per armor up buff consumed. All of her debuffs that trigger by special attacks can also be triggered through the block. But moving on to the special attacks. Special 1. The last hit refreshes all personal non-damaging debuffs on the opponent, and if there's no debuffs to refresh, it instead inflicts 2 debuffs with the same type and potency depending on which weapon she's currently on. The Special 2. The last hit will inflict an Incinerate debuff on the opponent and an additional one for each personal non-damaging debuff on the opponent, and against mutants, it inflicts an identical plasma debuff instead, the Special 3. Upon activation, it'll consume all of her personal Incinerate as well as plasma debuffs on the opponent and deal a burst of energy damage for each debuff consumed. And if the opponent is not inflicted with any personal Incinerate or plasma debuff, it'll instead inflict 6 Incinerate debuffs, and against mutant champions, it'll then inflict an identical plasma debuff instead. Moving on to the Awakened ability. It grants her passive energy resistance, depending on signature ability, for each personal non-damaging debuff on the opponent. It also grants her Special 2, the ability to inflict an additional Incinerate debuff for each prowess effect on the opponent, up to a maximum of 5. And lastly, for each armor up that is consumed by a special attack, there will then be a chance, depending on Sig ability, for her to gain a new armor up buff. And that is pretty much it for the abilities of Omega Sentinel, a very solid champion with a rotation that is very good. She's pretty much focused on inflicting Incinerates or Plasma depending on what type of opponent you're fighting, as well as extra damage on the SP3 depending on how many debuffs you have. Pretty simple overall and very solid, but yeah, onto her design. In my opinion, this is one of the top 5 best looking champions in the entire game. Now, a couple of months ago when I came back to the game, I saw her and I immediately thought, damn! I just had to have her, man. Then I got her as a 5-star, then I got her as a 6-star, and yeah, I kinda haven't really been using her as much as I thought I would. But design wise, the hair looks amazing. The white plate on the face. Ooh. Now, I'm not saying I have a thing for robots, but oh my goodness, this is just way too much. She has a literal lotus flower thing for a block, and she's freaking flying on her toe. Oh my goodness. She's pretty much just a really cool character, and I feel like they couldn't have done better with her character design. Well, visually at least. But anyways, moving on to the topic of why you should play her. Now first off, I kind of want to talk about her negatives first. And one issue I kind of have is not really with her as a character, but pretty much with the whole type of debuff playstyle as a whole. Now she's definitely not the first champion to come out in this game, where you pretty much have to place debuffs and then pretty much refresh them in some type of way. It's pretty much a stressful playstyle, and only a few people pretty much like this playstyle. For me personally, it's kind of a bit too stressful, and even though she has different ways to actually pause the debuffs as well as refresh them, the timer does not last long enough to a point where you can actually play with her and feel comfortable. But another problem I also have is with her block. The moment you start a fight, you'll pretty much have 0 armor up buffs, meaning that whenever you're gonna be facing a Dr. Doom, the moment you either parry or even miss it, you're gonna be missing a big chunk of health. But basically those are the only 2 issues I have. The block proficiency one, which is only apparent at the beginning of the fight, and the pausing effect not being long enough. However, these are only problems that I found. But why should you play Omega Sentinel? She has a lot of Incinerate damage and has a lot of utility. She can counter miss, she has heal block, and she also has special attack damage reduction. Woo! And not to mention her auto block, which acts as a type of safety measurement in case you do slip up and get hit. Of course, it does have the downside of consuming all of your armor ups, but it is a worthy sacrifice. Now, in my opinion, she isn't really the best mutant counter when compared to someone like Nimrod, but Karima herself is pretty much just sort of a step up and an evolution to the debuff placement playstyle. Definitely not the most comfortable and definitely not the safest to play. However, the amount of utility she does provide definitely is one of a kind. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know down in the comments who next I should make a video on. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!
I got that spirit on me, I hope you're feeling it too. Cause that's the only way you ever finna break out the loop. The cycle of people failing to discover the truth. You ain't free, bro, the devil is a part of the youth. Scrambling brains, ain't trying to bring the righteous to shame. Giving the fame to people that can help do the same. Making a group for people who have nothing to gain. And telling them lies to make them think that God is the same. Like, hold up.